All right, y'all, we are on episode 2 of our female friendship series, and today we're talking about some pretty intense stuff. We're talking about this problem of rivalry and comparison in female friendships, and I was actually really surprised at how many of you brought this up as an issue, because it totally didn't cross my mind. And the other thing we're talking about is how to handle conflict in a Christ-like way. We'd love if you would subscribe to our channel, and I hope you enjoy the video. Okay, another thing that y'all talked about that was a barrier to female friendships is this kind of problem of rivalry and jealousy and comparison among women. So I don't know, what's at the root of that? What do we do about it? Why is it happening? Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I feel like we just feel like it's always keeping up with the Joneses. It's, seeing everyone's fake lives on Instagram and Facebook and social media and feeling like we just are not up to par. And I think it's a lack of transparency and authenticity a lot of times because it's scary to be vulnerable. It's scary to share your heart. It's scary to look messy. I think that's maybe part of it is we just don't see a true version of each other sometimes, especially maybe when we're first getting to know someone. And that comes with time and maturity and depth in friendship. So that does take time. I think that's part of it. I think another part is we just are people pleasers. We want everyone to love us. We want to look perfect. We want to seem like we have it all maybe sometimes. And I think something I've really been learning a lot. I read a book by Tim Keller called The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. And it just made me realize how selfish I am. I know that, but I think I'm realizing it more and more, especially once you get married and especially you have a kid, you realize, wow, this is really not all about me. And I want it to be. And even if I don't think that way, I'm an Enneagram 2, which is I'm a helper. I want to show up. I want to do all the things. I want to say yes to all the things. But at the root of it, I want to be thanked. I want to be appreciated. I want to be affirmed and all those things. And I think sometimes that just, again, shows my heart of selfishness and not just serving. And when you forget about yourself and want to love other people, you are content in who the Lord has created you to be, and you're content in Christ alone, then you don't care so much about the responses. You just give freely because that's the joy you have in your heart. And you just truly and authentically want to get to know someone, not necessarily out of the response for you, but just to love that other person well. That's my initial thought.
I'm just going to say it's a red flag if you have a friend who is constantly jealous of you, has a hard time encouraging you and cheering you on, and is constantly making comments about your weight, your house, your marriage. That is not healthy. And if the root of it is going back to what you said, it's about for Christians, we can be secure in who we are, flaws included, because of what Christ has done for us. But I don't think you can be in a deep and meaningful friendship with someone who is exhibiting kind of these red flags of comparison, jealousy, because I think the Christ-like way to do friendship is to acknowledge that everyone has strengths and everyone has different things they bring to the table. And then just be excited. I think about that verse about the body of Christ. We are all different. We are all needed. And sometimes you don't feel like the best part in the story. In different seasons, people struggle too. And people are more successful in different seasons. And everyone has those ups and downs. And kind of like you said, Sandy, is if we had more transparency, it might help. It might help. But also people might just find other things to tear you down for. So I don't know. I guess the other part of this is, what if you're the one who's struggling with comparison, jealousy, competition? And I think it's turn to the Lord. And if you're not a believer, the amazing thing is that we bring nothing to the table. God did everything for us. And the only way I can be secure in anything is because of Jesus. And that might sound over spiritualized, but it's true. Those are the two things I can think about where I feel like compared to other women, I haven't struggled as much with insecurity, I think I've had seasons of that, is because of one, the Lord, and two, I had really awesome parents who were like, you can do this, you can do everything, and just like encouraged the heck out of me. And that's just like a gift from the Lord, you know, and not everyone has that. And I know like underneath all this comparison and jealousy, there's someone's whole history too. And so if people are exhibiting those behaviors, you can maybe put up boundaries, but also give them grace too. Those are my thoughts. Okay, here was another popular question. Everyone's favorite topic, conflict. How, for Christians, how do we handle conflict? I feel like we need to define that a little bit in a Christ-like way. I feel like today, like, people define conflict as any uncomfortable conversation, and I'm not sure that's really like conflict. But I guess if there's there's an issue to be addressed or there's a hurt, like, how do we handle that?
Yeah. I'm definitely not the perfect person in this area, but I will say I lean towards the more confrontational side in that I care about other people. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I want to bring air to anything that feels stagnant or stuffy or uncomfortable, because we just need to figure out what's going on. I think it goes back to choosing to believe the best about your friends, giving grace, and coming into a conversation with an open heart and open mind. Definitely praying before you have these conversations.
Yes.
Bring it to the Lord instead of other people always. Like if you do maybe one or two other people, maybe your spouse, just to, or like a strong Christian in your life who can give you the advice, but not telling the whole world. But I think bringing it to the Lord first is number one, just asking him to give you peace and understanding of the conversation, and then being willing to have it. Finding a time and a space. Don't let it linger. It just causes more bitterness in your heart, more anxiety, more stress. And come to the conversation again with like, help me understand. This is how I felt. This is how I perceived it. Tell me your side. And just hear them out. Maybe it was something you totally like overreacted on and they're like, oh, I didn't even realize it. Or maybe they're like, no, actually, like I feel pretty crummy about this too. I found every time I've been willing to be authentic and vulnerable in a conversation with a friend, it's most of the time proved fruitful if that friend truly cares back. And then you kind of just have to reevaluate, you know, how did that conversation go? What steps are we going to take, you know, to reconcile? And hopefully you're on the same page. If you both love the Lord, you can bring those differences to each other and then give them to the Lord and work on them if that friendship is important to you. Another thing is just being willing. It's hard not to be harsh when you're hurt. I think sometimes it's, John likes to tell me, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And I think we have to learn to find the line of speaking the truth in love to friends. So finding that balance of just coming to a conversation, speaking the truth in love, I think is helpful.
Yeah, you and I are both like, we cannot stand if there's something under the surface. Like if there's a relational conflict, it's like, let's talk about this. Like no matter how hard the conversation is, we're going to talk about it. And what I've learned, that was actually what, when I asked a friend about like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And she was like, you taught me about how to like communicate through conflict. And literally she was my roommate in college. And I remember like chasing her down in the dorm because we had had a fight and being like, we need to talk about this. But what I've learned, what Jen in her 30s has learned through being married to a person who needs time to process things is, yes, you should talk about it, but it's okay if you wait a few minutes or a few hours or a few days to talk about it. But yes, and I love what I heard a pastor say about in marriage, handle conflict early and often, and it's the same thing in friendship. I think maybe why we avoid some of these things with our friends is with your spouse, like if you're a believer, like you're like, we got to handle this because we're in it like for the long haul, right? And with friendships, people have more freedom to walk away. And I think it's so sad when people walk away without having a conversation that maybe could have like remedied what was going on, or there was a miscommunication, or there was a misunderstanding. And what we tend to do, at least what I tend to do, I think what most women tend to do is like fill in the blanks of what the person was thinking, why they did what they did, why they said what they did. and you haven't asked them, so you have no idea, but our mind just like shifts towards like the worst case scenario. And so you can give this person an opportunity to explain themselves, maybe to apologize. Like, so yeah, communication. I think we're talking a lot about communication, and when both people truly care about the other person and they have their best interests at heart, like this should go pretty well most of the time.
I agree.
And I also think at a certain point, you're going to have a misunderstanding or a hurt with a friend or with anyone if you're in relationship long enough with someone.